Students and viewers, Assalamu alaikum. Welcome once again to my online class. I am Murshida Imam, Assistant Professor, Department of English, Government Shahid Sohrawardi College, Dhaka. Today I am here for the students of Honors 4th Year, Department of English. My dear students, how are you? Hope you are fine and enjoying your online classes. You know, in our previous class, we read Part 1, Chapter 2 of the novel Sons and Lovers by D.H. Lawrence, and today we will read part 3 of part 1 chapter 3 of the novel Sons and Lovers. Get ready with your textbook and start doing the class, and go to part 3. Okay, chapter 3 of the novel Sons and Lovers, and the title of the chapter 3 part 1 is The Casting Off of Morel, the Taking On of William. And students, so get ready with your text and start doing the class. The starting line of part 1 chapter 3 is like that is, during the next week, Morel's temper was almost unbearable. Like all miners, he was a great lover of medicines, which, strangely enough, he would often pay for himself. So, you see, Mr. Morel, that is Walter Morel, began to fall ill. In this chapter, we see that he falls seriously ill, okay, and though he takes medicine regularly, and you see that in this chapter, in this part 1 chapter 3, we will see that Mrs. Morel nursed him very carefully, and gradually Morel grew better. According to the text we see that is, this time, however, neither pills nor vitriol nor all his herbs would shift the nasty pains in his head. He was sickening for an attack of an inflammation of the brain. He had never been well since his sleeping on the ground when he went with Jerry to Nottingham. Since then he had drunk and stormed. Now he fell seriously ill, and Mrs. Morel had him to nurse. He was one of the worst patients imaginable, but in spite of all, and putting aside the fact that he was breadwinner, she never quite wanted him to die. Still, there was one part of her wanted him for herself. So, here we see that the responsibilities of Mrs. Morel to Mr. Morel, and sometimes we see that the neighbors are very good to her. Occasionally, some had the children into meals. Occasionally, some would do the downstairs work for her. One would mind the baby for a day. But it was a great drag, nevertheless. It was not every day the neighbors helped. Then she had nursing of baby and husband, cleaning and cooking, everything to do. She was quite worn out, but she did what was wanted of her. So, here we see that Mrs. Morel is a very responsible woman, okay. She's taking care of her husband and doing every household works happily, okay. But here we also see that the money was just sufficient. She had 17 shillings a week from clubs, and every Friday Barker and the other booty put a portion of the stall's profits for Morel's wife, and the neighbors made broths and gave eggs and such invalids trifles. If they had not helped her so generously in those times, Mrs. Morel would never have pulled through without incurring debts that would have dragged her down. So here we see that the neighbors of Mrs. Morel are very helpful to her, though not every day, okay, but they helped him much. And the weeks passed. Morel, almost against hope, grew better. He had a fine constitution, so that once on the mend he went straight forward to recovery. Soon he was pottering about downstairs. During his illness, his wife had spoiled him a little. Now he wanted her to continue. He often put his hand to his head, pulled down the corners of his mouth, and shamed pains he did not feel. But there was no deceiving her. At first, she merely smiled to herself. Then she scolded him sharply. Goodness, man, don't be so lachrymose. That wounded him slightly, but still he continued to feign sickness. I wouldn't be such a muddy baby, said the wife shortly. Then he was indignant and cursed her under his breath like a boy. He was forced to resume a normal tone and to cease to whine. So, here from this description, we see that at the time of illness, Mr. Morel, that is, Mr. Morel uh, was spoiled a little. That is spoiled here. That means he wanted much care from his wife. Okay, so a new characteristic of Mr. Morel we see, that is he drew the attention of his wife. Okay, and he wanted much care from her wife. And then, nevertheless, there was a state of pitch in the house for some time. You know that the conflict between Mr. and Mrs. Morel was a common fact in their family. But for the time being, that is at the time of his weakness or illness, we see that there was a state of pitch in the house for some time. And Mrs. Morel was more tolerant of him, and he, depending on her almost like a child, was rather happy. Neither knew that she was more tolerant because she loved him less. Up till this time, in spite of all, he had been her husband and her man. She had felt that, more or less, what he did to himself, he did to her. Her living depended on him. There were many stages in the ebbing of her love for him, but it was always ebbing. So, here we see that the love between Mr. and Mrs. Morel grew once again. Okay, that is, Mrs. Morel became very much sympathetic to his husband, Miss Walter Morel. And you see the humor of D.S. Lawrence, that is, now with the birth of this third baby herself no longer set towards him helplessly, but was like a tide that scarcely rose, standing off from him. After this, she scarcely deserted him, and standing more aloof from him, not feeling him so much part of herself, but merely part of her circumstances. She did not mind so much what she did, could leave him alone. So, my dear students, here we see that the relationship of Mr. and Mrs. Morel regained at the time of his illness. Okay, then again, this Lawrence described the relationship between them in this way, that is, during his recuperation, when it was really over between them, both made an effort to come back somewhat to the old relationship of the first months of their marriage. He sat at home, and when the children were in bed and she was sewing, she did all her sewing by hand, made all shirts and children's clothing. He would read to her from the newspaper, slowly pronouncing and delivering the words like a man, pitching quotes. Often she hurried him on, giving him a phrase in anticipation, and then he took her words humbly. The silences between them are peculiar. There would be the swift, slight cluck of her needle, the sharp pop of his lips as he let out the smoke, the warmth, the sizzle on the bars as he spat in the fire. And then we see that then her thoughts turn to William. Okay, who is William? You know, the first child of Mr. and Mrs. Morel. That is, already he was getting a big boy. Already he was top of the class, and the master said he was the smartest lad in the school. She saw him a man, young, full of vigor, making the world glow again for her. So we see that William, the first child of Mr. and Mrs. Morel, uh, was very brilliant. Okay, and the master said about him that he was the smartest lad in the school. And Morel, sitting there quite alone and having nothing to think about, would be feeling vaguely uncomfortable. His soul would reach out in its blind way to her and find her gone. He felt a sort of emptiness, almost like a vacuum in his soul. He was unsettled and restless. Soon he could not live in that atmosphere, and he affected his wife. Both felt an oppression on their breathing when they were left together for some time. Then he went to bed, and she settled down to enjoy herself alone, working, thinking, living. And so the you see the peaceful moment of the family of Mr. and Mrs. Morel in this chapter, that is chapter 3, part 1. And meanwhile, another infant was coming, fruit of this little peace and tenderness between the separating parents. So you see, Mrs. Morel uh, got pregnant once again, and Paul was 17 months old when the new baby was born. Okay, then he was then a plump, pale child, quiet, with heavy blue eyes, and still the peculiar slight knitting of the brows. The last child was also a boy. So you see, the last child of Mr. and Mrs. Morel was also a boy, fair and bony. Mrs. Morel was sorry when she knew she was with child. You see, my dear students, this line marks this line, that is Mrs. Morel was sorry. Why was Mrs. Morel sorry? Because both for economic reasons, and because she did not love her husband, but not for the sake of the infant. I am repeating the line once again, my dear students, that is Mrs. Morel was sorry when she knew she was with child, both for economic reasons and because she did not love her husband, but not for the sake of the infant. Okay. And what is the name of the last child? My dear students, you know, Arthur. So they called the baby Arthur. He was very pretty, with a mop of gold curls, and he loved his father from the first. Mrs. Morel was glad the child loved the father. Hearing the miner's footsteps, the baby would put up his arms and crow. And if Morel were in a good temper, he called back immediately in his hearty, mellow voice, "What then, my beauty? I shall come to thee in a minute." And as soon as he had taken off his petticoat, Mrs. Morel would put an apron around the child and give him to his father. So, what a sight the lad looks! She would exclaim sometimes, taking back the baby that was smoothed on the face from his father's kisses and play. Then Morel laughed joyfully. "Is it little collier? Bless his bit of mutton!" he exclaimed. And these were the happy moments of her life now, when the children included the father in her heart. So you see, the Arthur, that is the last child of Mr. and Mrs. Morel, was very much fond of his father, unlike his other brothers. Okay, and for this, Mrs. Morel was very happy that this boy, that is Arthur, loved his father. And meanwhile, William grew bigger and stronger and more active, while Paul, always rather delicate and quiet, got slimmer and trotted after his mother like her shadow. Okay, so here we see the contrast between William and Paul. And he was usually active and interested, but sometimes he would have fits of depression. Then the mother would find the boy of 3 or 4 crying on the sofa. "What's the matter?" she asked, and got no answer. "What's the matter?" she insisted, getting cross. "I don't know," sobbed the child. So she tried to reason him out of it, or to amuse him, but without effect. It made her feel beside herself. Then the father, always impatient, would jump from his chair and shout, If he doesn't stop, I will smack him till he does. So here we see that Mr. Morel is not so much sympathetic with Paul. Okay, mother is very much sympathetic with Paul, but here we see the different feelings of father. Okay, you will do nothing of the sort, said the mother coldly, and then she carried the child into the yard, plumped him into his little chair, and said, now cry there, Marjorie. And then a butterfly on the roof leaves perhaps caught his eye, or at last he cried himself to sleep. Here the description of nature. Okay, the butterfly we see, and roof leaves. Okay, these fits were not often, but they caused a shadow in Mrs. Morel's heart, and her treatment of Paul was different from that of the other children. Okay, my dear students, here we see a special kind of feeling of Mrs. Morel for Paul. Okay, and now we in this situation we see that suddenly one morning, as she was looking down the alley of the bottoms of for the barman, she heard a voice calling her. Okay, what was the voice? Yes, she was a neighbor of Mrs. Morel, the named Mrs. Anthony. Okay, here we see that the Anthony came to their house and complained against William. Okay, that is she complained that William had ripped her son Alfred's collar, and then William also told her mother about the situation, that he didn't do it willingly. Okay, and he convinced his mother. But here once again we see that in this chapter, that is the conflict between Mr. and Mrs. Morel, that is the complaint provoked another battle between Mr. and Mrs. Morel, but Mrs. Morel prevented him from beating William. Here we'll see how angry was Mr. Morel with at how angry was Mr. Morel at the behavior of William. Okay, here we'll see, that is when William suddenly William ran in saying, "Can I have my tea, mother?" "Then can have more than that," shouted Morel. "Hold your noise, man," said Mrs. Morel, "and don't look so ridiculous." "He will look ridiculous before I have done with him," shouted Morel, rising from his chair and glaring at his son. William, who was a tall lad for his years but very sensitive, had gone pale, and was looking in a sort of horror at his father. That is, he feared his father. "Go out," Mrs. Morel commanded her son. William had not the wit to move. Suddenly Morel clenched his fist and cursed. "I'll give him out," he shouted like an insane thing. "What?" cried Mrs. Morel, panting with rage. "You shall not touch him, for her telling you, you shall not." "Shall not I?" shouted Morel. "Shall not I?" And glaring at the boy, he ran forward. Mrs. Morel sprang in between them with her fist lifted. Okay, so and she cried, "Don't you dare!" "What?" he shouted, baffled for the moment. "What?" She spun round to her son. "Go out of the house," she commanded him in fury. The boy, as if hypnotized by her, turned suddenly and was gone. Morel rushed to the door, but was too late. He returned, pale under his pit dirt with fury, but now his wife was fully roused. "Only dare," she said in a loud, ringing voice, "only dare, my lord, to lay a finger on that child. You'll regret it forever." He was afraid of her. In a towering rage, he sat down. So here we see that Mrs. Morel came between father and son and made up the situation. Okay, and then after this conflict, once again we see that when the children were old enough to be left, Mrs. Morel joined the Women's Guild. My dear students, Here you have to learn about the women's guild. It's a very important topic. Okay, my dear students, mark it. That is, feminism first enters Sons and Lovers in the form of the Women's Guild, to which Mrs. Morel belongs, and it's an autobiographical element too. That is, the details are those of Mrs. Lawrence's own life. Okay, and but students, here according to the text we see that Mrs. Morel joined the Women's Guild, and it was a little club of women attached to the Cooperative Wholesale Society, which met on Monday night in the long room over the grocery shop of the Bestwood Co-op. The women were supposed to discuss the benefits to be derived from cooperation and other social questions. Sometimes Mrs. Morel read a paper. It seemed queer to the children to see their mother, who was always busy about the house, sitting writing in her rapid fashion, thinking, referring to books, and writing again. They felt for her on such occasions the deepest respect, but they loved guilt. It was the only thing to which they did not goose their mother, and that partly because she enjoyed it, partly because of the treats they derived from it. The guild was called by some hostile husbands who found their wives getting too independent the Clutford shop, that is, the gossip shop. It is true, from off the basis of the guild, the women could look at their homes, at the conditions of their own lives, and find fault. So the colliers found their women had a new standard of their own, rather disconcerting. And also, Mrs. Morel always had a lot of news on Monday nights, so that the children liked William to be in when their mother came home, because she told him things. So here you see that is Mrs. Morel enjoys these meetings in Women's Guild, and they give her an opportunity to use her intelligence and her sharp tongue in discussion, and she gains a new stature in the eyes of her children. That is, it seemed queer to the children to see their mother, who was always busy about the house, sitting, writing in her rapid fashion, thinking, referring to books, and writing again. So they felt for her on such occasions the deepest respect. And also we see that the guild is, however, resented by many of the men. That is, the guild was called by some hostile husbands who found their wives getting too independent the Clutford shop, that is, the gossip shop. So here the guild no doubt served a useful purpose in raising the political awareness of ordinary women. And we also see that Mrs. Morel was an exceptional miner's wife. Okay, but through the cooperative guild, women's cooperative guild, we see that she is not alone in her desire to transcend the narrow and limited conventions of the community, or to change it for the better. With other colliers' wives, she frequents the women's cooperative guild, an organization which gives them a new perspective on their lives. The miners react to this with hostility. The following we have described the passage, that is, it demonstrates how a conflict similar to the one described above, that is, this time over the question of whether the boys should go down the pit or seek no manual occupation, is said by Lawrence within a general social context. Okay, and we'll see it later. Then you see that then when the lad was 13, that means William, okay, was 13, she got him a job in the co-op office. That is, Mrs. Morel got William a job in the co-op office, and he was a very clever boy, frank, with rather rough features and real Viking blue eyes. But here once again we find a clash between Mr. and Mrs. Morel. That is, Mr. Morel, that is Walter Morel, didn't want that. That is, he said it would now put him in the pit with me and it will earn an easy 10 shilling a week from the start. But 6 shilling wearing this truck end out on a stool's better than 10 shilling in the pit with me, I know. But Mrs. Morel said, he's not going in the pit, and there's an end of it. So we see that Mr. Morel wanted that his son William would work in the pit, that is in the mine, like him. He would be a miner. Okay, William would be a miner like him. But Mrs. Morel said he's not going in the pit. So here, my dear students, we see that the social class distinction, that is the mentality of the middle class, or that is the minor people. Okay, they always wanted that their son, or that is their next generation, will also be a miner like them. But we see that Mrs. Morel is different from others. Okay, that is, she always wanted to make her children educated, and he wanted that he would do better, okay, better job than the miners. Okay, so you see, all the moral quarrels are really social conflicts, as can be seen by close examination of the realistic context in which particular conflicts are realized. Okay, the battle between mother and father for position of the first child is to be noted here. Okay, and here we see that Mrs. Morel's vision of the child is an attempt to set him beyond the community and its conventions. Okay, and here we see also that the child, she reacts instinctively with grief and anger, that is, her illusion is shattered. The child now looks like any other miner's child. She did not lie, she does not want that. Okay, she didn't want that. That is, the conflict then is in fact a very important conflict of values. It shows Mr. Morel trying to establish the norms and conventions of the community, and Mrs. Morel trying to transcend them by individual appropriation of the child, making him different. Okay, and later she acknowledges the justice of the action. Okay, and Mrs. Morel, as I mentioned earlier, that is an exceptional miner's wife here, and Mrs. Morel was successful to make her son different from others. That is, she was very proud of her son. He went to the night school and learned shorthand, so that by the time he was 16, he was the best shorthand clerk and bookkeeper on the place except one. Then he taught in the night schools, but he was so fiery that only his good nature and his size protected him. So you see that William was very brilliant, and he was doing good, and he was different from other boys in the miners. Okay, and here we see that then he began to get ambitious. He gave all his money to his mother. When he earned 14 shillings a week, she gave him back two or for himself, and as he never drank, he felt himself rich. He went about with the bourgeois of best wood. Okay, bourgeois means middle class. Okay, and the townlet contained nothing higher than the clergyman. He then came the bank manager, then the doctors, then the tradespeople, and after that the hosts of colliers. William began to consort with the sons of the chemist, the schoolmaster, and the tradesmen. He played billiards in the mechanics hall, and also he danced in this in spite of his mother. Okay, all the life that Bestwood offered, he enjoyed, from the sixpenny hops down Church Street to sports and billiards. So, my dear students, you see, William was leading a different life than the other miners. Okay, and Paul was treated to dazzling descriptions of all kinds of flower-like ladies, most of whom lived like cat blooms in William's heart. for a brief fortnight. Occasionally, some flame would come in pursuit of her errant swine. Mrs. Morel would find a strange girl at the door and immediately she sniffed the air. So, here we see, my dear students, that when William started dancing, then he began to make relationship with other ladies, okay, and Mrs. Morel did not accept it finally, okay. And so yeah, the conversation between the girl and Mrs. Morel is like that. That is, the girl came and said, "Is Mr. Morel in?" The damsel would ask appealingly. "My husband is at home," Mrs. Morel replied. I mean young Mr. Morel," repeated the maiden painfully. That is, she did not mean Mr. Morel, Walter Morel, okay? That is the first son of Mr. Morel, that is William. She wanted William. So, Mrs. Morel said, "Which one? There are several." Whereupon, much blushing and stammering from the fair one, I met Mr. Morel at Ripley," she explained. "Oh, at a dance?" "Yes. I don't approve of the girls my son meets at dances, and he's not at home." So we see the reaction of Mrs. Morel towards the girl with whom William danced. So here, my dear students, first that is the Mrs. Morel became the rival of his friend of, that is girlfriend of William, okay. And then he came home angry with his mother for having turned the girl away so rudely. He was a careless yet eager looking fellow who walked with long strides, sometimes frowning, often with his cap pushed jollily to the back of his head. Now he came in frowning. He threw his cap onto the sofa and took his strong jaw in his hand and glared down at his mother. She was small, with her hair taken straight back from her forehead. She had a quiet air of authority and yet of rare warmth. Knowing her son was angry, she trembled inwardly. "Did a lady call for me yesterday, mother?" he asked. "I don't know about a lady. There was a girl came." "And why didn't you tell me?" "Because I forgot simply. He fumed a little. "A good-looking girl seemed a lady." "I didn't look at her." "Big brown eyes." "I did not look. And tell you, girls, my son, that when they are running after you, they are not to come and ask your mother for you. Tell them that brazen baggages you meet at dancing classes." So, my dear students, between the conversation between mother and son, we get a clear idea that there is something, okay, that is the William would not be able to make a fruitful relationship with other girls, okay, without the consent of his mother. Then in this chapter, we see that when William was 19, he suddenly left the co-op office and got a situation in Nottingham. In his new place, he had 30 shillings a week instead of 18. And this was indeed a rise. His mother and his father were brimmed up with pride. Everybody praised William. Okay. So once again we see that William was praised by everybody. Why? Because he got a better job, okay, and it seemed he was going to get on rapidly. Mrs. Morel hoped with his aid to help her younger sons, and he was now studying to be a teacher. Paul, also very clever, was getting on well, having lessons in French and German from his godfather, the clergyman, who was still a friend to Mrs. Morel. Okay, was that clergyman? Can you guess, my dear students? Yes, Mr. Hayton. Okay. And then Arthur, a spoiled and very good looking boy, was at the board school, but there was talk of his trying to get a scholarship for the high school in Nottingham. So here you see that the children, all of the children of Mr. and Mrs. Morel were doing well. Okay, and for this the contribution of mother was much. Okay, and William remained a year at his new post in Nottingham, and he was studying hard and growing serious. Something seemed to be fretting him. Still, he went out to the dances and the river parties. He did not drink. Okay, so you see, William did not drink like his father, and the children are all rapid teetotalers. He came home very late at night and sat yet longer studying. His mother implored him to take more care, to do one thing or another. But my dear students, will see that Mrs. Morel didn't like dance. Okay, dancing. That is dance. If you want to dance, my son, but don't think you can work in the office and then amuse yourself and then study on top of all. You can't. The human frame won't stand it. Do one thing or the other. Amuse yourself or learn Latin, but don't try to do both. So we see that Mrs. Morel was not liking, that is, Mrs. Morel didn't like that. Oh, he would do all the things together. Okay. Then he got a place in London at 120 a year. It seemed a fabulous sum. His mother doubted almost whether to rejoice or to grieve. They want me in Lime Street on Monday week, mother, he cried, his eyes blazing as he read the letter. So we see that William once again got a chance in London. Okay. And uh, uh, Mrs. Morel felt everything so silent inside her. That is, he read the letter, and will you reply by Thursday whether you accept? Yours faithfully. They want me, mother, at 120 a year, and don't even ask to see me. Didn't I tell you I could do it? Think of me in London, and I can give you 20 pounds a year. Matter, mother, we shall all be rolling in money. We shall, my son, she answered sadly. That is, mother, though William would get much money, much salary in London, she, that is Mrs. Morel, became sad. That is, she agreed, but not willingly or spontaneously. Okay. It never occurred to him that she might be more hurt at his going away than glad of his success. Indeed, as the days drew near for his departure, her heart began to close and grow dreary with despair. She loved him so much. So, my dear students, here the relationship between son and mother. Okay, that is, she loved him so much. So she didn't want that she would go far from her. Okay, more than that, she hoped in him so much. Almost she lived by him. She liked to do things for him. She liked to put a cup for his tea and to write on his colors, of which he was so proud. He was so proud. It was a joy to her to have him proud of his colors. There was no laundry, so she used to rub away at them with her little convex iron to polish them till they shone from the sheer pressure of her arm. Now she would not do it for him. Now he was going away. She felt almost as if he were going as well out of her heart. So the feelings of mother for William, okay, as the day came drew nearer, she felt almost as if he were going as well out of her heart. That is, he did not seem to leave her inhabited with himself. That was the grief and the pain to her. He took nearly all himself away. And a few days before his departure, he was just 20. Okay, he was just 20, and he burned his love letters. Okay, my dear students, they mark this point, that is, he burned his love letters when he was just 20. And here once again this line hints that William won't be successful or won't be happy in his with other lady in his life. Okay, and they had hung on a file at the top of the kitchen cupboard, and from some of them he had read extracts to his mother. Okay, some of them she had taken the trouble to read herself, but most were too trivial. So here we see that before going to London, William burned his love letters, and he was doing that with cooperatively with his mother. Okay, and here the description of burning his love letters we find, And last over, okay, the last line of this chapter 3 is like that. Soon there was a heap of twisted black pages, all that remained of the file of scented letters, except that Paul had 30 or 40 pretty tickets from the corners of the notepaper, shallows and forget me nots and ivy sprays. And William went to London to start a new life. And the symbol of burning love letters, my dear students, that is, he is going to start a new life in London. And that's all about chapter 1, part 1, chapter 3 of the novel Sons and Lovers by D.H. Lawrence. And that's all for today, my dear students. Now I want to give you homework. Get ready to take homework. Question number 1, that is, how old was Paul when the new baby Arthur was born? Question number 1, I am repeating. How old was Paul when the new baby Arthur was born? Question number 2, why did everybody praise William? I am repeating the question. Question number 2, why did everybody praise William? Then question number 3, write a short note on women's guild. Okay, the spelling of guild, G-U-I-L-D. Okay, women's, apostrophe S, of course. Write a short note on women's guild. Okay, my dear students, hope all of you will do your homework. Then, my dear students, no more today. See you again in our next class. And in our next class, we will read our next chapter. Okay, till then, be happy. Goodbye. Allah Hafiz.